It was one of those warm, sleepy Sunday mornings when the world feels unusually quiet. The street was lined with perfectly trimmed hedges and identical mailboxes, the kind of neighborhood where everything looked picture perfect, until you lived there long enough to notice the cracks under the paint. I had just poured my second cup of coffee when I noticed it, a bright yellow slip taped to my front door. At first glance, it looked official, the kind of thing that makes your stomach drop before you even read the words. Notice of Violation HOA Directive. I sighed. Not again. I pulled it off and read the rest, the paper crinkling between my fingers. Your property is in violation of community regulations due to unauthorized modifications to exterior landscaping and vehicle storage. Immediate compliance required. Failure to do so may result in fines or eviction proceedings. Eviction. That word hit harder than it should have. I'd lived here for 6 years. Paid my mortgage early every month. Repainted the trim myself last summer. My house wasn't just a building, it was my late wife's dream. But apparently, none of that mattered to the HOA. I folded the paper, took a long sip of coffee, and muttered, "Guess Karen's at it again." Karen Mitchell, the self-appointed queen of the Willow Oaks Homeowners Association. Blonde hair, tight ponytail, and a clipboard that looked surgically attached to her arm. She ran the HOA like a personal empire, her favorite pastime being finding new ways to remind people that she had authority. My neighbor, Tom Greeley, waved from across the street, holding his morning paper. "You got one too?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Same nonsense?" He chuckled dryly. "She nailed me last week for having my trash bins visible for more than 30 minutes. I swear she times us with a stopwatch." I shook my head. "She's got too much time and too little purpose." "Careful," Tom said, lowering his voice. "She's been bragging about some new authority the HOA gave her. Supposedly, she can start eviction procedures herself." I raised an eyebrow. "Evict? From property I own?" He shrugged. "Wouldn't put it past her." That's when the low rumble of a white Lexus broke the quiet. Sure enough, Karen herself rolled down the street, window down, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She spotted me, parked right in front of my driveway, and stepped out with a folder in hand. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice sugary and sharp. "I assume you've seen the notice?" "Good morning to you too," I said evenly. She smiled, a thin, performative smile. "We've had several complaints about your vehicle parked on the curb overnight. That's against HOA regulations." I glanced at my old F-150. "Karen, it's parked in front of my own house." "Yes, but the policy applies to all streets within the subdivision. Rules are rules." I set my coffee cup on the porch railing. "Karen, this is the third notice this year. First it was the mailbox color. Then the lawn height. Now this. You're really running out of things to complain about." Her smile disappeared. "I'm simply maintaining standards. If you find those too difficult to follow, perhaps this isn't the right community for you." I stared at her, half amused, half disgusted. "You're suggesting I move out of my own home?" "Not suggesting, Mr. Bennett. Advising." She turned, heels clicking on the pavement, and got back into her car. As she drove off, I caught sight of her HOA badge hanging from the rearview mirror. "Self-importance, laminated." I stood there for a long minute, trying to calm the slow burn in my chest. I'd dealt with petty authority before, but this was personal. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was picking a fight. And she had no idea who she was fighting with. That afternoon, I drove downtown to my office building. The city skyline shimmered in the heat, and the glass tower that bore my company's logo, the Stratford Group, rose above everything else. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the chief operations director of one of the largest property management firms in the region, a firm that happened to own over a dozen real estate subsidiaries, including one called Oak Ridge Holdings, the parent company of the Willow Oaks Homeowners Association. Karen Mitchell worked for me, and she didn't even know it. I walked through the lobby, nodded at reception, and took the elevator to the 28th floor. My assistant, Jenna, handed me a folder the moment I stepped out. Morning, Daniel. Got the files you asked for all HOA subsidiaries, current management structures, and lead officers. Perfect, I said, flipping through. Willow Oaks? She pointed to a tab. Managed under Oak Ridge. Local president is Karen Mitchell. Seems like she's overstepping a bit? You could say that, I replied, scanning the reports. I stopped when I saw the numbers: inflated community fees, unauthorized fines, even complaints buried under vague resolved tags. She'd been abusing power and hiding it under bureaucracy. My jaw tightened. She's going to regret this. Jenna raised an eyebrow. You want me to draft a suspension notice? Not yet, I said, closing the folder. Let's do this my way. By Monday morning, Karen had posted yet another notice on my door, this one threatening a hearing about my supposed violations. I smiled as I read it. Perfect. That evening, I attended the HOA meeting in the community clubhouse. The room smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. A dozen residents sat in folding chairs, their faces a mix of irritation and exhaustion. At the front, Karen presided like a judge, gavel and all. When my name was called, I stood and walked up calmly. Mr. Bennett, she began, your continued disregard for community policy. Actually, I interrupted, I'd like to address that. She frowned. Excuse me? I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a thick folder, and placed it on the table. These are internal reports from Oak Ridge Holdings, the company that owns and manages Willow Oaks. You might recognize the name. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. I don't see what that has to do with. It has everything to do with it, I said quietly. Because I'm Daniel Bennett, Chief Operations Director of the Stratford Group, Oak Ridge's parent company. Which means, technically, you work for me. The room went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Karen blinked. That's not possible. You can't. I can, I said, voice steady. And I will. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Around us, the residents whispered, realization dawning on their faces. I leaned forward slightly. This hearing is over. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending internal review. I'll be assigning an interim HOA lead by tomorrow. Karen stood there frozen, color draining from her face. I picked up the yellow notice from her table, the one she'd taped to my door, and tore it neatly in half. Next time, I said, think twice before trying to evict someone from their own home. As I walked out into the cool night air, the neighborhood lights glimmered along the street. The same street she'd patrolled like a queen. Not anymore. Because the crown had just fallen. And this was only the beginning. For the next few days, Willow Oaks was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No notices on doors. No passive-aggressive emails about lawn decor. No Karen patrolling the sidewalks like a sheriff of suburbia. You'd think peace would feel good. But peace after a storm always carries a strange silence, like the air's waiting to see if the thunder's really gone. I was sitting on my porch that Thursday morning, coffee in hand, when I spotted her. Karen's Lexus slowed as it passed my house. She didn't stop, didn't even look my way. Just drove on, eyes hidden behind her sunglasses, her expression unreadable. It should have felt like victory. But something told me this wasn't over. At the HOA office, my assistant Jenna had been keeping tabs. She was efficient like that, organized chaos hidden behind a calm smile. Morning, she said as I walked in. You're not going to like this. I set down my briefcase. What now? She's been calling around. Apparently, Karen's been contacting some of the other HOA presidents in nearby subdivisions. Spreading rumors. About me? About you, and about her wrongful suspension. She's saying you targeted her personally. That she's the victim of corporate corruption. I exhaled sharply. Of course she is. Jenna handed me a folder. And it gets better, she filed a complaint with Oak Ridge's HR division. She's demanding reinstatement. I couldn't help but laugh. She's trying to fight the company that literally owns the company she works for? Yup, Jenna said. And she's scheduled a public HOA meeting this Saturday. Says she's going to reveal the truth. Let her, I said after a pause. But we'll be there too. Saturday arrived with a heavy gray sky. The kind that promises rain but waits for the right moment to pour. The community clubhouse was packed. Word had spread fast, homeowners, neighbors, even a few board members from other HOAs had shown up. The air buzzed with quiet curiosity and tension. Karen stood at the front again, her posture stiff, her voice sharp as she addressed the crowd. Many of you know me as someone who's worked tirelessly to uphold the standards of Willow Oaks, she began, her tone polished. Recently, I was suspended without cause by an individual abusing his corporate position for personal revenge. Murmurs rippled through the audience. I stood at the back, arms crossed, watching. She continued, this man, Daniel Bennett, used his title to remove me for simply doing my job. I was enforcing the same rules that protect your property values. And for that, I was punished. She gestured toward me dramatically. He's here today, hiding behind his company's power. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I stepped forward slowly, letting the silence stretch. When I reached the front, I looked directly at her. Karen, I said evenly, you're right about one thing, I am here. But I'm not hiding. She folded her arms, chin raised. Then explain yourself. Gladly. I turned to face the crowd. My name is Daniel Bennett. I'm the Chief Operations Director of the Stratford Group, which owns Oak Ridge Holdings, the parent company responsible for Willow Oaks HOA management. When I moved here 6 years ago, I was just another resident. I paid my dues, kept my lawn trimmed, followed every rule. I paused. Until your HOA president started using her power like a weapon. Karen scoffed. That's a lie. I opened my folder and placed several documents on the table. These are records of fines issued without proper cause. Complaints from residents marked as resolved when they were ignored. And accounts of harassment from homeowners, including threats of eviction for trivial issues like mailbox color and trash bin timing. Whispers spread again. I saw faces shifting from curiosity to anger. This isn't community management, I said. It's intimidation. Karen's voice cracked slightly as she tried to regain control. Those were standard enforcement measures. You don't understand how much work goes into. I understand perfectly, I cut in. Because I oversee 32 HOAs just like this one. And not a single one of them treats residents like tenants on a leash. She flinched, her composure fracturing. The room was no longer hers. I turned to the crowd again. I didn't suspend Karen because she enforced rules. I suspended her because she abused them. From the second row, Tom, my neighbor, raised a hand. So what happens now? I nodded. Effective immediately, Willow Oaks HOA will be placed under interim management while we conduct a full audit. Residents' fines will be reviewed and refunded if found invalid. And moving forward, any board member found exploiting authority will be permanently removed. The room erupted into quiet applause. Relief, gratitude, even disbelief, it was all there. Karen, on the other hand, looked like the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Her lips trembled as she pointed at me. You can't do this. I've given years to this neighborhood. You can't just erase me. I looked at her sadly. You erased yourself when you forgot what community means. And with that, I walked out. It rained that night, soft at first, then steady. I stood by my window, watching droplets slide down the glass. The storm outside mirrored the one settling in my chest. I wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. Jenna called around 9 p.m. Hey, she said. Wanted to let you know HR officially processed her termination. Effective today. I nodded silently. That's done then. Also, she added, a few residents have been writing letters. Thanking you. You did the right thing, Daniel. Yeah, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. I just wish it hadn't come to this. Some people only learn when the curtain falls, Jenna said softly. But the curtain, as it turned out, hadn't quite fallen yet. 2 weeks later, I came home to find a black sedan parked across the street. A man in a suit stepped out, mid-40s, expensive watch, practiced smile. He walked up my driveway like someone who belonged everywhere. Mr. Bennett, he said, extending a hand. I'm Richard Vaughn, attorney for Karen Mitchell. I didn't take his hand. You're on my property, Mr. Vaughn. What do you want? He smirked faintly. A conversation. Ms. Mitchell believes her suspension and termination were retaliatory in nature. She's filing for wrongful dismissal and defamation. I exhaled slowly. You're serious? Deadly serious, he said. You've embarrassed her publicly. Damaged her reputation. We're prepared to take this to court unless a settlement is reached. I studied him, noting the slick confidence in his eyes. He wasn't bluffing. Not entirely. Tell her, I said finally, she can do what she wants. But if she goes to court, those buried HOA records, the ones showing she overcharged residents and pocketed fees, will become public record. That wiped the smirk off his face. He adjusted his tie. I'll relay that message. Do that, I said, closing the door in his face. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the glow of the TV casting soft shadows on the walls. Outside, the rain had returned, tapping gently against the windows. I thought of Karen not as the power-hungry HOA tyrant, but as a person cornered by her own arrogance. I'd seen people like her before. When you build your world on control, losing it feels like dying. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. Or so I thought. Because the next morning, I found something new taped to my door. No yellow paper this time. Just a plain white envelope. Inside, a single typed line. You might own the company, Daniel, but you don't own me. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for hours. Plain. Harmless. Yet it carried the kind of weight that gnaws at your mind. That single line, you might own the company, Daniel, but you don't own me, felt less like a threat and more like a declaration. Karen wasn't finished. And part of me, deep down, already knew that people like her rarely went quietly. By the next morning, it started again. Not official notices this time, but whispers. Neighbors mentioned strange phone calls from anonymous sources. Rumors about my past, my work, my finances, all laced with just enough truth to sound convincing. Someone was trying to rot my reputation from underneath. Jenna noticed it too. She came into my office with a concerned look. It's her. Karen's been feeding stories to local blogs. Claims you exploited your corporate power for personal gain. I sighed, rubbing my temples. How bad? Nothing that'll stick legally. But it's spreading fast. People love a good scandal. I looked out the window at the city skyline. Let her have her noise. Facts will drown her fiction. Jenna hesitated. You sure about that? She's angry, and desperate people don't stop at rumors. I smiled faintly. Neither do I. That night, I drove to Willow Oaks. The neighborhood was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. I parked near the clubhouse, the same building where she once presided like royalty. Now, its windows were dark. Abandoned. Until I noticed a faint light inside. I stepped closer, rain misting in the cool air. Through the glass, I saw her, Karen Mitchell, sitting at one of the tables, folders scattered around her like a paper battlefield. I opened the door slowly. It creaked. She looked up sharply, eyes tired but still burning with that familiar defiance. Breaking and entering, Karen? I asked softly. This is my office, she snapped. Correction, I said, stepping forward. Was. You were terminated 2 weeks ago. She scoffed. Oh, please. You think a piece of paper can erase what I built here? Her voice trembled, half fury, half exhaustion. You humiliated me, Daniel. You think I don't see how you enjoy it? You wanted to show everyone the big boss putting the little woman in her place. Don't do that, I said quietly. This isn't about power or gender. It's about decency. She laughed bitterly. Decency? You think those people out there care about decency? They only respect control. Order. Someone to keep them in line. I gave this neighborhood perfection and you took it from me. I looked around at the piles of paperwork, her old notices, files, lists of supposed violations. Her obsession laid bare. You didn't give them perfection, Karen, I said. You gave them fear. She slammed her hand on the table. You don't get it. Without people like me, places like this fall apart. Rules keep everything beautiful, predictable. Maybe, I said. But they also choke the life out of a place when they're used wrong. For a moment, she just stared at me, the kind of look that tells you she's hearing the truth and hating it at the same time. Then she said, quietly, you think you've won? I didn't want to win, I said. I wanted peace. She exhaled shakily, her shoulders slumping. For the first time, she looked small, not the HOA tyrant, but a woman who'd built her whole identity on authority and lost it overnight. I don't know who I am without this, she whispered. I hesitated. Maybe that's something you need to find out. A week passed. The rumors fizzled out as quickly as they'd begun. People stopped whispering when the audit results came in. Karen had indeed pocketed a small fortune in processing fees and administrative surcharges. Nothing that screamed criminal, but enough to burn any chance she had at sympathy. The local paper ran a quiet article. Former HOA president found mismanaging funds, community votes for new leadership. No names were smeared. No victory laps were taken. Just quiet truth. And sometimes, quiet truth is louder than any revenge. It was a Friday evening when I saw her again. I was walking my dog past the small park near the entrance of Willow Oaks. The air smelled of cut grass and early summer. She was sitting alone on a bench, dressed simply, jeans, cardigan, no makeup, no clipboard. Just Karen. When she noticed me, she didn't flinch or turn away. Instead, she stood up and waited as I approached. Daniel, she said, her tone stripped of venom. Karen. We stood there a moment, the silence more honest than any argument we'd ever had. I got your message, I said finally. You don't belong to anyone. I get it. A faint smile ghosted across her lips. That wasn't about defiance. It was about taking back control. For once, doing something on my terms. I can respect that, I said. She looked around at the manicured lawns and glowing porch lights. You know, when I first took this job, I thought I was helping. Keeping things nice. Orderly. Then somewhere along the line, it became about control. I stopped seeing people and started seeing rules. That's how it happens, I said quietly. You start building fences, and one day you realize you're the one trapped behind them. She nodded slowly. I've been offered another position. Not in housing, community outreach. Smaller town up north. Figured, maybe I could do things differently this time. Good, I said, meaning it. You deserve that chance. She studied me for a moment, then asked, do you really think I was that bad? I thought of the endless notices, the tension, the fear she'd sown, and the loneliness I now saw behind her eyes. I think you lost your way. But I also think you found it again. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen Mitchell smiled without a hint of superiority. It was small, almost fragile. Goodbye, Daniel, she said softly. Goodbye, Karen. She turned and walked toward her car. No Lexus this time, just an old silver sedan with worn paint and a new beginning waiting on the horizon. Weeks later, Willow Oaks looked different. The lawns weren't perfect anymore. Some houses had garden gnomes, others mismatched flowers. The streets looked a little less uniform, but a lot more alive. Tom waved as I drove by. "Neighborhood feels lighter," he said. "Yeah," I replied with a grin. "Guess we finally got rid of the thunder." He chuckled. "You did more than that. You gave people their home back." I thought about that all the way home. How sometimes the real victory isn't winning, it's restoring balance. Letting people breathe again. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something fluttering against my door. For a split second, my heart skipped. Not another notice, I thought. But it wasn't. It was a small card. White. Handwritten. "Thank you for reminding me what community really means. KM." I smiled. Folded it neatly. And pinned it to the inside of my office corkboard. A reminder that power doesn't make people better, choice does. And sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones that end in peace instead of punishment. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the street glowed golden, the houses calm and imperfectly beautiful again. I leaned against the porch rail, coffee in hand, and felt the kind of quiet that comes only after everything has been said and done. For the first time in a long time, Willow Oaks was finally home.